Photographer of the Year, let's hear it for Dan Shelley, Shellda Photos.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Shellda podcast. My name is Dan Shelley, your host, and today looks a little different. This is the first time since episode 1 that I actually am not joined by another guest. So we'll dive into that, but this is going to be a little bit of a different format than what we usually do. But before we jump into that, I have two amazing show sponsors that I want to give a huge shout out to. First and foremost, Hormesis. Man, Alex and the team have been with me since day one, and I'm actually recording this a few days before I leave for Atlantic City, and so I'm so excited to go to Atlantic City and see all of the folks in the Hormesis booth, hang out with Kevin, and I'm even bringing a few of my Inner Dragon headbands with me, the ones that released with the Dynasty Children's book that I wrote a few years ago, because I know there's a few kids that I got wind of that will actually be at this event, and they don't know it yet, but they actually have a headband waiting for them. So super excited to be able to gift some Hormesis headbands to some kids at this event. And then secondly, BFP gear. You know, Junior and Gina Brown have been with me since day one of this podcast, and we have just built such an incredible relationship between the three of us over the past few years. And it's so cool watching BFP gear just continue to rise amongst all the paintball brands. I mean, they're crushing it. You know, they are one of the title sponsors of the top 2 pro teams in the world right now, right? Like at Tampa, they had Dynasty and Paintball Fit battling off together, and they both were sponsored by BFP gear. So you can't get much better than that. And right before the event, Junior actually hooked me up. I'm working on my Atlantic City build, and Junior hooked me up with some soft ears. If I can see it there, if you're watching on YouTube, hooked me up with some soft ears because I always have to have soft ears in my ProFlex. So huge shout out to my sponsors. But yeah, let's jump right into today's episode. So, like I said, this is going to look a little bit different. One thing that I always wanted to hold true with doing this podcast is, I always wanted to be honest. You know, I watch a lot of podcasts and I listen to a lot of other podcasts, and you can tell when the host is either fake or something's like fabricated a little bit. And doing this, that's something I wanted to hold true to myself, is I just always wanted to be honest with all of you, my listeners out there. And doing the podcast and being a photographer, and you know, I do all this on the side. Like I've got a full-time 9-to-5 job in my real world. And so it's a lot to juggle all three, especially when it gets close to the event weekends, you know, because I have to, of course, fly to the event, take thousands and thousands of photos, edit all of them, and then also bookend that trip with 2 podcast guests, right? Because one for Tuesday and one for the following Tuesday. And I wanted to hold a commitment to myself to never, ever miss a week, no matter what. And so what I typically try to do leading up to event weekends is I will double or triple book. That way I can have a few podcasts ready to go like a week or 2 in advance. That way, just in case if anything happens, it's okay. I've got them lined up, right? Like if I have a flight that gets delayed or canceled, that way I'm not struggling to miss a day. Well, today I was getting ready to do that. I had 2 guests lined up to record today. And that way I would have a guest for the first Tuesday after Atlantic City. And then I would have a guest for after that, the week after. That way I could start to get ahead a little bit. Both guests actually canceled last minute due to some unforeseen just real life situations. And so in order to not, not miss a week, I thought, what can I do? Let me give all of you just an inside look into me. And I wrote down a few topics that we're going to jump into. And the first one is, after doing all of my podcast, I write. So I've got a journal where like I'll write about what did I learn, what were my takeaways, and then I go and I go right upstairs and I tell my wife Amanda, like, we talk about it, and it's just a form of therapy for me. And so I thought it'd be really cool to share what has the podcast taught me about myself since I started. And then I've got a few other topics that we're going to jump into. And then I did something today that I thought was pretty cool. I haven't looked at them yet, but on Instagram, I posted, you could ask me any questions. And so at some point we'll jump into those questions of what some of you have actually asked on Instagram. So the first question I want to tackle is, what has the podcast taught me about myself since starting? When I reflect back on, I think I want to say this will be the 23rd episode that I've done. I didn't believe in myself when I first started, and not just as a podcast host or podcaster, but just as a person in general. I think, if you've been listening to the podcast since day one, you've heard me talk a lot about imposter syndrome and like struggling with that. And I don't know if it was necessarily imposter syndrome, but more of just not believing in myself and not believing that I could do something or not see the potential in it, or being afraid of the potential. And I think that all boiled down to what I figured out was being afraid of failure and being afraid of judgment, and being made fun of essentially from people. And so I think when I look back at my life, that I can see different points in my life where I wanted to try something or like try a new hobby or whatever it is, but I limited myself because I was so afraid of what somebody or what people may think if it didn't go right. And so through doing this podcast, I've learned a lot that I need to believe in myself, and I need to be comfortable with who I am as a person, and know that everything I do is not going to be successful. There's going to be things I do in my life that are going to fail, but what can I take away from those things, and what is the lesson that I can take away to grow as a person? And so doing this podcast each and every week has really helped drive that home for me. And it's just been an incredible tool. Like I've noticed, probably for the last 10 or 15 years without really knowing it, I struggled with anxiety, and starting this podcast has really allowed me to look deep into, wow, one, I didn't even know I had anxiety. And two, hearing other people share that they have or had anxiety and what they did to cope with it or to overcome it or to just manage it. I've used some of those tools and tactics to help my own, and I've seen it like start to decline. I've seen it start to go away, and I felt freer and I felt more present in so many moments. And so, yeah, this podcast is just every single week, like I take something away from it, and it's just been such a beautiful journey so far for me personally. And then the second thing I've learned is how powerful vulnerability truly is. I hear people talk about it. I hear famous authors talk about it. It's on TV shows, movies. You hear, people get on stage and they talk about, vulnerability and how to do it, how it can impact your life. But when you sometimes think about yourself doing that, it sounds really scary, and you talk yourself out of it. And I never saw the power of vulnerability until these last probably 3 years or so. My wife Amanda was really big on it and had really pushed me to like be open and be vulnerable with who I am and, share my thoughts. And I did a little bit, but definitely not as deep as what I needed to. But starting this podcast and having guests on, people that I used to look up to when I was a kid, come on to now my show, and they're being vulnerable and opening up and sharing some really deep personal stories. For some reason that just unlocked something in me that, wow, it's okay for me to do that too. So it's almost like I needed that trusted space, or I needed to see it in action from other people, to know that it was okay for me to do it. And so, yeah, looking back at this podcast journey so far, I've been the most vulnerable I ever have been, in my personal relationships, my professional relationships, and I'll call them my paintball relationships too. So yeah, it's been a really incredible journey. And if I could give a piece of advice around vulnerability, just try not to be afraid of sharing something, because you never know what the person on the other side of the conversation is thinking. And what I mean by that is, if you don't share something, you're almost robbing that person of a potential connection with you. There's been so many times where, I've shared an emotion or a thought or some type of feeling, and one of the first responses on the other side of that conversation is somebody saying, wow, me too. Thank you for sharing that. And then when you hear that, it just unlocks something in that conversation. It unlocks something in that relationship you have with that person. And I can't recommend doing that enough. The other thing that this podcast has taught me is, I think in all of our sports, and especially, the other thing that this podcast has taught me is, in all sports, especially in ours, the professional athletes we look up to as just absolute superstars, right? When we think of the greats of the world, the Ryan Greenspans, the Billy Bernaccias, the Archie Montemayor's, a lot of people would be afraid to, one, approach that person, two, have a conversation with them. In doing this podcast and having some of those people on, I've learned that, wow, these are just people. They're just like you and I. They go through highs and lows of life just like we do. They go through trials and tribulations. And just because they're labeled a professional athlete for a sport that we all love, we're putting them on a pedestal when really they just want to be treated like a human, just like you or I. And so it's really taught me to look at people in paintball and out of paintball with a completely different lens on, where, now I try not to let a title of someone or, like a job that someone has or a role that they have predefine who they are. I really want to get to know the person, when I have the person on the podcast or just having a conversation. And so, yeah, this podcast so far has just taught me so many life skills. And it's crazy to think that, only being 23 episodes in, and it's already helped elevate me personally. I can't wait to see like where the next 20, 30 or 40 episodes are and like what I'll have learned from those episodes. Speaking of learning, I want to talk about what I've learned in paintball, and, again, being in the spirit of being raw and honest and vulnerable with all of you. When I first started this, I had dreams and goals of, I want to be on the pro field and I want to rub shoulders with, the best of the best. And I want to have conversations with, the untouchables of the sport. And it felt so good coming back to my local field and being like, oh, you'll never guess who like is reaching out to me via text message or direct message, or you'll never guess, who I had dinner with. And I was so excited for those things, but it was for the wrong reason. I was excited for them because I was looking for validation from people, that validation of like, hey, wow, you made it, like, great job, kudos for you. And I think that came from a place of, I was so insecure at the time that I needed that validation to let me know that I was doing the right thing. But now that I'm on, 2 or 3 years into the paintball media side, and, now that I'm, almost half of a year into doing a podcast and having some really in-depth conversations, looking back, looking back at paintball, the most important thing, it's not rubbing shoulders. It's not, being the best of the best or trying to be number one. The most important thing is relationships. Sponsors are going to come and go. Teams are going to come and go. Players are going to come and go. Trades are going to happen. But the most important thing is the relationships that you build. And what I mean by that, if I can give like a specific example, is paintball is such a interesting sport where we sometimes only see players 4 or 5 times a year at these national events. And so we're having, sometimes really in-depth conversations for 10, 15 minutes at most. And then that conversation stops for 2 months. And then when you see that person, it picks up. And I think we all know what I'm talking about if you're involved in the sport, right? Like, we always hear, hey, we see somebody and the conversation, it just picks up naturally. But what I've learned in that is I try to remember just a few pieces of each conversation that I have with those individuals. That way, when I see that person again, I can say, hey, you mentioned last time about your wife, doing some type of having this milestone or maybe a career change. How's that going for her? How's it going for you? Do you need anything? And by doing that, that's showing that person on the other end of your conversation that, wow, you genuinely care, because you're putting time into really letting that conversation soak in, and locking it away. So when we see each other again, you can tie back to that. And so that's something that I've really tried to do. And honestly, it's helped a lot of my relationships grow naturally because of that. And I think when you do that, a lot of people look at you with like wow, thank you for thinking about that. And it makes them feel human. It makes them feel like you genuinely care about that person. That's advice someone gave me a long time ago. I think when I was probably, fresh out of school in a sales job or something. And it's stuck with me ever since. And it's really led to like some beautiful relationships, both inside of paintball and outside of paintball. Is just really trying to focus on that conversation and take a few pieces of information away from it, that you can use again when you see that person, as picking up that conversation right where you left off. And then one of the other questions I get asked a lot is, how do you build a successful brand? There's so many photographers or so many videographers out there, but not a lot of people have an actual brand around it. And the biggest, I think, few pieces of advice I could say is, if it's something that you truly want, the first thing you can do is go after it, and don't be afraid to go after it. And I know that sounds so cliche and you're going to hear that everywhere, but if I break that down even further, the sport of paintball is so small. And so if you have an idea of starting a brand and the person next to you has an idea of starting a brand, if you take one action of, writing down your brand name, maybe grabbing your Instagram handle, you're already doing 100% more effort than the person who just had a simple idea and they're not going to action on it. And so because our sport is so small, just by going after it is you're gonna already be night and day different from people who are just dreaming about having a brand. And then the second piece of advice I could say is, whatever you do decide to go after, stay consistent with it. Consistency is the single most important piece of advice I could give to anyone, whether you're starting a photography brand or you're starting a clothing, a merch line in the sport. Whatever it is, just make sure you stay consistent, because the moment that you aren't consistent, you're going to lose your audience and you're going to start to lose your followers. And not in a sense of, oh, my follower count dropped, but more of the commitment. Someone, as silly as it sounds, when someone commits to following your page on Instagram or buying your merchandise, there's like an unwritten commitment that you as the creator or business owner, you're going to continue to put out whatever the product is you're putting out, whether it's virtual or physical products. So staying consistent is so important in today's game, especially if you're getting into the content creating side of it. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about, which I think could be a touchy subject for some people, but what people don't talk about on the media side, I think a lot of people think it's this incredible, glamorous life. And honestly, it is. You get to go capture memories for incredible people and players of all levels, not just at the pro level, but down to the divisional level. Some of my favorite moments are not capturing the pros. They're actually capturing D4 and D5 moments of some of my closest friends, because those are memories they're going to be able to cherish forever. And they're going to print that work and put it in their homes and their home offices. But the flip side of that is, holy cow, being on the paintball media side, it is so grueling. If you're going to NXL events, depending on how many teams you're booking, you're having to run back and forth to different fields. You're having to chase schedules if schedules get behind or if there's any delays. And then, you're taking thousands and thousands of photos or, terabytes of storage if you're on the video side of it. And then after that, you've got to go back to the hotel. And, while everyone else gets to go out to dinner with their friends and teammates, you're having to dump all this footage and edit and try to get a piece of content out there. That way it can help your brand stay relevant and help you, look for some validation. I think we all look for at these events. And then when you get home, the event doesn't stop there. That's really when the event starts, is when you get back after the long few grueling days and you're in front of your computer grinding. And so I think that's why you see a lot of people will get into paintball media, and then there's like this arc where they get into it, they grow their brand, and then within a year, like they fall off or you don't hear from them as much or at all. And I think that's because of one or two reasons. One, it's too hard, and they got into it for the wrong reasons. They got into it to make money first, when really it should have been passion first. But the second part of that is they're getting into it because the second part of that is, if you make it to the pro level and you're on the pro field, a lot of the a lot of the platinum, I won't say a lot of, there are a few platinum sponsors out there that will sometimes take advantage of media where they will say, hey, we're going to give you a platinum sponsor or a platinum pro pass to get you on the pro field because it's going to help your brand grow. So they're giving you brand awareness by you being on the pro field. And I think a lot of people fall into that trap where you start to undervalue yourself in your work, and you undervalue, a lot of what you have to go through as a paintball media. I definitely fell into that when I first started. I was trading photos for pro passes, and I was paying my way to every NXL event just to help grow my brand. And while it was amazing, it definitely got expensive after a while, and it was not sustainable. And so, I think if you're if you're on the paintball media side and you're looking to grow your brand, one thing I wish I would have done sooner is I would have not undervalued myself and undervalued my work, because I think I had some companies early on take advantage of that newness. So take that for what it's worth. But the doing this it's not for everybody, just like anything, right? Like if it's not for you, that's okay. I love what I do. I love capturing moments. I love capturing memories, but I had to make sure my priorities were right first. If I was doing this to make money, I probably would have already stopped. And so it's definitely passion first for me. And then, one thing I think a lot of people, I always get to be on the flip side of this, and I get to ask guests, like, hey, what are you struggling with? Or like, what are some things you're going through right now in life? And I don't think I ever get that. And one of the things I get to do, and so something else I wanted to talk about is I always get to ask guests, hey, what are you struggling with? What are some things that are challenging in your life right now? But it almost feels like I get to ask you those things, but and then the other thing I wanted to talk about is, I always get to ask guests, hey, what are you struggling with? But I don't think it's fair that I get to ask you that same respect. And one of the things that, and then the next topic, I wanted to jump to is I always get to ask guests, hey, what are you struggling with right now? Or what's something you're working through in your life? But I never get to share those things. And I think I've seen it, in comments, and people are reaching out to me like, hey, we would love to hear what you're going through and what some of my struggles are. And so I thought this would be a really cool episode to share some of that. And so again, being, transparent and honest with you is one of the goals I've had for this podcast. Something that I'm struggling with right now is I don't know what's next for me. And what I mean by that is when I look back to 3 years ago, when I started this photography journey, I wanted to grow a brand. I wanted to have my own merchandise line. I wanted to work with the top teams and the top brands in the league. And, when I found out that there was an award, I wanted to win that award. And so I've been able to achieve every goal that I've had and more by being a paintball photographer at the highest level. And so I don't know what is next. And I don't know what the photography part looks like for me. because I've come into paintball and I've made an impact on it with photos. I've told a lot of amazing stories, but I think there's a huge potential with this podcast and with this platform to get more vulnerability and get more of these stories out that we all crave for people in our sport that we look up to, and the pros and the rest of the people in paintball who make the sport really work and click. And so I definitely am struggling with that right now. Is, do I put more time into doing the podcast? Yeah, so I don't know. That's something that I'm definitely working through and trying to figure out what is left for me to do with the photos. And is it time for me to switch gears and put more effort into the podcast? So that's something, me being open and honest and vulnerable with you guys. Okay, so I am going to open up Instagram, and like I said, I haven't seen these questions at all yet, so I don't know what these are. And full transparency, like, here's all the questions that you guys have all been asking, and so I'm just gonna go right off the top and rip these. So the first one is from, I'm going to try not to butcher these screen names, and if I know the person, like, I'll say the person's name. This is from Impastor Naked, I think is her screen name, and it's Daniel Camp's wife of the Hurricanes. And her question is, how did you come up with the plot for your book? And so what she's talking about is, if you haven't seen it yet, I think it's about 2 years ago now. Yeah, about 2 years ago. I wrote a children's book in collaboration with Dynasty in Hormesis called A Dragon's Journey to Dynasty. And where I came up with the plot for that book was, I was at, I think it was the second event of my first year, and I looked around and there were so many younger kids there who were sitting in lawn chairs and just had headphones on and were just nose deep in an iPad. And like, I would see parents come off the field and, they would be excited, and the kid just, they couldn't share that moment because they didn't understand what was going on the field. And the flip side of that is, paintball can be really scary to a young kid because there's a lot of yelling. There's a lot of swearing. The paintball guns are obviously very loud and can be intimidating. And so I wanted to find a way to somehow make the sport a little bit less scary for kids. And, spoiler alert, if you haven't read the children's book, the whole plot is, the young character Cooper is going to try out for the pro team Dynasty, and the tryout does not go well. His nerves kind of kick in. I think he gets made fun of, and he goes through the ups and downs of a full tryout of, what somebody would go through going through that, like the self-doubt. And throughout the story, there's like an inner dragon that it's almost like a voice that he keeps hearing. It gets louder and louder. And throughout the story, on each page, there's an image of a dragon that gets more and more prevalent. And then as he finds his inner dragon at the end of the book, he ends up making the team, and Ryan Greenspan ends up presenting him with his own Dynasty jersey, and then tying back in the whole, hey, you found your inner dragon, we have it too. And it's just been so cool having parents reach out saying how much they've connected, or they've been able to connect with their kids over that. And so, thanks. That's a really great question. Thank you. This next one is from Jeff Munoz. He's a local guy here in Austin, and I think a lot of people may know him. He says, "Does pineapple belong on pizza?" Oh man, this is like one of those questions where if you answer it one way, you're going to get hate, and if you answer it the other way, you're going to get hate. So I'll answer it two ways. One, me personally, I like my pizza without pineapple. The flip side of that, I just love pizza, and so however you take your pizza, like that's the most important thing. I do enjoy pizza that has pineapple and ham on it. Although it's not my favorite pizza. Uh, yeah, so I don't. Let's see. I know I'm dancing around this question. I'm gonna lean my hat on. Does it belong on pizza? No. Sorry for all you pineapple pizza lovers. This one comes from one of the other media members, a great friend of mine, and I don't even want to call him up and coming because that's undervaluing his work, but a great photographer, ARG. His question is, as a two-time photographer of the year winner, looking back, what are some key pieces of advice you can give? I think his message got cut off, but what are two pieces of advice you can give? The first piece of advice, and I've given this to so many people, is you have to stay consistent, especially in the photography game. You're not getting as many views or clicks or you're just not getting as many eyeballs in it as a video guy would on the reels. And so because of that, you have to stay consistent. I've never missed a day posting at least one photo since I started this whole journey 3 years ago. And I really think I attribute a lot of my success to that consistency. And because of that, I think I've built up trust in my brand that it's here and it's not going anywhere. So that's the first piece of advice is to be consistent. And I think the second thing is when you're posting, if it's pictures or posting photos in Paintball, make sure there's like some type of passion or story behind it. That's something that is so important because if you're out there sacrificing your body, your gear, you're sacrificing your time away from your family. And if you're posting this beautiful photo and then the comment doesn't match that, or the caption doesn't match that, you're kind of discrediting yourself. And so, every photo that I post, I try to have some type of story with it or some type of caption that ties in the feeling in that photo. And I think I tied that back to almost like a little bit of photojournalism, and that's been really helpful for my success. So great question. This comes from Joey. I'm going to butcher your name, and you're going to kill me for butchering your name. Joey, is it Knapski? I think Joey's one of the Dynasty pit crew members. But Joey asks, what is something you wish would change in tournament paintball that you believe would help? I think there's two things. And there's one I don't think we're going to be able to solve immediately because we don't have the space for it. But somehow getting away from split deck on the pro scene, it doesn't allow for the commentators like Maddie Marshall and other media to tell stories and to really build up the characters in those games. I think that's so valuable. And I've heard a lot of people say that that's the missing piece. And I would agree. If you don't have a connection with a certain player or a team, you're not going to be invested. And you see it with, NFL and other sports. That's why, early on in the games, they're doing these little 30-second, 45-second clips of what the player's gone through, what their journey is, because those small things help you build a connection to that player, which helps you want to tune in more. And then the second piece of that is it's and then the second piece of that, and again, it's something that we've talked about for years. I just don't know if technology is there yet. but the camera angles have to change. It's having the first person view or having a camera on the top of someone's mask. It's never a good angle because when you're snapping out, all you're looking at is 3/4 of a hopper. And so we have to find a way to get a camera either on the barrel or somehow attached to the player's mask. So that's why I don't think we're there yet technology wise, but that's something that I think would help change and grow the sport. This question is, this is from a local headband company called Hype Headbands. How much wood can a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? There you go. I got through it. A lot of wood. That's how much wood a woodchuck would chuck. See, I messed up. But yeah, they would chuck a lot of wood. This one comes from a good friend of mine, Zach Hagee. He's a Shellda squad supporter. So Zach, appreciate your support, my man. His question is, what is the hardest thing to talk about? The first few things that popped into my mind were vulnerability. And that's such like a blanket answer. But what I mean by vulnerability is if someone asks you like, hey, are you okay? I think a lot of our default reactions are to say, yeah, I'm fine, or yeah, I'm good. And it's so hard to say, you know what? Actually, I'm not. I'm having a really hard time because of. Those are really hard things to do. And I think I need to do a better job at that. And I think a lot of people listening need to do a better job of that. So great question. This one comes from another photographer in Canada, Andy Ace Photo. What's more important to getting a strong relationship with the player or the team, or get the shot? What's more important to, I see. What's more important to you, getting a strong relationship with the player or the team, or get the shot? I think I understand what you're asking there. And so for me, I've noticed my work elevates if I have some type of personal connection to either the player, the team, or the brand. If I'm out there and like a random team hires me that I don't know any of the players or anything about the team, I notice I am searching for shots more versus if I am going out there and shooting for some of my local friends that hire me at USXBL, or if I'm at NXL events and I'm shooting for, some of the top pro teams. It's a lot easier because I have some type of personal connection. And so when I'm taking those photos, I already can vision like what the reaction's going to be if it's an off the field shot. And so I hope that answers your question. But to summarize that, whenever I'm taking photos, I try to have a personal connection with what I'm taking. And I'm trying to, when I see a photo, it happens naturally. When I see something and I take a photo, I almost have like a caption with it in real time. Like it's not something that I even have to think about. Like it happens. And so I don't know where or why that came from. But yeah, good question. This one comes from Lauren Mason Salinas of Dallas Vibe and Paintball Fit. She says, before interviewing a guest, what type of process do you go through researching them? That's a great question. Man, starting this podcast journey, I've learned a lot about myself, and I've learned a lot through how I need to prepare and what I need to do to get ready to provide a good show. Because I think I'm at the spot now where people expect my episodes to have the questions that people haven't been asked before. And so I do a little bit of Instagram stalking if we're friends on Instagram, or if you have a profile, or if you're on Facebook, I'll do that. I will throw your name into Google to see if there's any other like interviews that you've been on. I think some guests have been on like Paintball Nerd before and other previous podcasts. And so like I'll watch those and then I'll take note of what questions would I like to ask you. But I think something that I've learned recently is when I'm thinking about having a guest on, the first thing I do is what's the burning question that I want to ask this person? And that question usually drives the rest of the questions without having to do a lot of research. What I have noticed is I'm getting further along into this journey and I'm having more people on that I don't necessarily have strong relationships with. I'm having to do more research and having to have more back and forth conversations with the guests. That's something else that I try to do with all of my guests is I send questions ahead of time of, hey, these are questions that I'm thinking about I want to use to help drive our conversation. But then I also give the guests an opportunity to say, hey, what are some things that you would like to talk about? Or what are some things that people don't know about you that you would love to share? And so I like to have a lot of dialogue back and forth before I just randomly bring on somebody. So that's a great question, Lauren. Thanks for asking that. This comes from someone with the name of O2 Natalie. And she says, what's the gear you use what's the gear you use most on the field? Something that you thought you really wouldn't be useful. Wait a second. That's so far away. One more time. All right. We'll try this again. What's the gear you use the most on the field and something you thought would be really useful and isn't? Oh, wow. That's a good question. What's the gear you use the most on the field? I mean, obviously it's my camera. But I think something that I took for granted early on was a pair of gloves. And what I mean by that is like, I'm always on the ground taking pictures. And so my hands are always pushing off the grass, pushing off the dirt, pushing off paint. And what I notice when I'm not wearing gloves, my hands get all oily and then I'm transferring that oil to the camera. And it makes the camera really slick and really hard to use. And so when I'm wearing gloves, even though some of that stuff may still get on the camera, having the grips in the actual fingers of the camera make it a lot easier to grip it. And it just, it becomes a lot easier for me to do my job at the highest level. And then what's something that you thought would be really useful and isn't? So this is something that I've gone back and forth with, because I'm getting up and down so many times. I mean, there's points where I'm standing up and laying down 5 or 6 times in a matter of 10 minutes. And so I'm a bigger guy and I put a lot of force on my knees when I'm going down because I have to get down to the ground really quick. And so I've worn knee pads for the first probably 2 years. But what I've noticed is since I'm at the field essentially for 12 hours every day, and I'm wearing knee pads the whole entire day, when I get back to the hotel, my knees are raw. I'm talking to the point where like they are red and they're swollen and it's just brutal. And so while I would love to continue wearing knee pads, I haven't found a solution yet that'll get me through 12 hours of consistent wear. And so for the past about year or so, I've actually not been wearing knee pads. And it's put a little bit of a toll on my knees going up and down quite a bit. Great question. This one comes from It's Adrian 42. And Adrian asks, what is your paintball history before media? My paintball history, I started playing when I was, I think, 10 or 12 years old. I started to play, in my backyard. I wasn't a birthday party kid like a lot of people. My mom actually was one of the first people that played paintball with me, and I never really got it past like a competitive division. Back then, I think I played, maybe it was novice or division 2, whatever it was in the NPPL days. And the cool thing at the time is those divisions all had to play a pro team. And so I got to play the Bushwhackers back then. And I think it was NPPL Denver, maybe '07. We played the Naughty Dogs, and it's actually featured in one of the old videos. It was a 7-second point. That was my first taste and experience of playing professionals. It was 7-on-7 off the break. I didn't see a single person. Got to my bunker, couldn't see a single person. And again, obviously, we all got shot really quick. I got off the field and I was just stunned at the level of how these players play. And then I've stayed a fan my whole entire life. And then when I got to high school, I got obsessed with Greg Hastings Tournament Paintball. That was an old Xbox game. And it got to the point to where I think they had like a ranking system online. And I got up to like number 3 or 4 in the world. And it got so bad that like I was skipping school for it. So I definitely don't recommend that. But it was a lot of fun playing many hours on Greg Hastings Tournament Paintball. This question is, how did you meet your spouse or significant other? So Amanda and I met, 5-6 years ago now. It's crazy how much time has gone by. We met through work. We just had like this instant connection. We both were relocating to Austin, and really just like we hit it off. No one's ever really asked me like in-depth questions like Amanda asked, and just I never really had anyone like genuinely care about me as a person and want to get to know me as a person. And I instantly fell in love with that. And it's just been an amazing journey ever since. This one, and that was from Justin Vasquez, who is also a Shellda Squad member. So thank you for the support, my man. This one is from 612 Films. What's the first thing that you think of when you enter the field to take photos? Oh, this is a really great question. So it depends. It depends on where it is. If it's at a pro event, so if it's at an NXL event, literally the first thing I think of when I step on the field on that Friday morning, or if it's World Cup the Thursday morning, is I take a moment of gratitude, and I think just, like people in my life. I talk to myself, and I thank my partner, Amanda, for allowing me to be there. I think back to when I was a kid and thinking, holy cow, I would do anything to stand on this field, and to be on the same field as the greatest players in the world. And then 2, I think about what an honor and privilege it is to be on that field and to capture those moments. That's something that I always take a moment to appreciate, because I don't know when the last time I'll step on that field for to take those photos at the highest level. And so because we don't know what that last time is, I always take a moment of gratitude for that. And then if it's, at like a local event, I do something similar, but it's more of I'm thankful that I get to create moments for my friends who deserve to be seen more. Especially down at the divisional levels, like Division 5 and Division 4, they're working so hard, and they deserve to be seen. They deserve to have these amazing moments, and they deserve to have moments etched in time, so that way they can cherish those forever. So great question. And I think that is it. Let me go back and refresh if anything else has come in since we started asking these questions. I think that's it. So yeah, this was this was a fun episode, a little bit of a harder one for me to do since it was more on focused on me and me having to be vulnerable. But I definitely want to make sure I never miss an episode. And so yeah, sometimes that's what life throws at you. You'll put a plan in place, and it's kind of like a good, it's something that paintball has taught me is you can go into the day with a lesson, and sometimes a player gets shot off the break, or sometimes your marker goes down and you've got to shift gears and figure it out. And, I went into today having a pretty solid plan of having 2 guests lined up, and it's, if we equate it to a paintball field, that's like getting 2 or 3 people shot off the break and your marker going down. Sometimes you can't stop that. So I made the best of it, and it was cool to like open up and get you all to look into side of who I am as a person. So hopefully you enjoyed this. If you do, I will try to do one of these maybe every quarter or every few months because it was fun. It's always fun to interact. So as always, thank you for the love and support, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Shellda podcast, and we'll catch you next time. See ya.